Zerodha just hit a massive milestone, 8,320 crore rupees in revenue in FY24. That's $1 billion. But what's even more impressive is their profit, which stands at 4,700 crore rupees. That's 56% of their revenue. Zerodha's business is thriving, but Nithin Kamath, one of the founders of the company, isn't celebrating just yet. In fact, he's a little bit worried. He's predicting that Zerodha's revenue could drop by 40 to 50% in the next financial year.
Few of the revenue items can potentially drop by 40-50%.
And I know what you're probably thinking here. Isn't Nithin always cautious? He always says that every year something bad is going to happen in the next year, but this year things might actually be different. First of all, around 10% of Zerodha's revenue comes from something called a volume-based charge structure. Basically, the more transactions Zerodha processes, the lower the transaction charges they have to pay the stock exchanges. And Zerodha doesn't pass this discount onto its customers. Instead, they charge them the full rate and pocket the difference as profit. And just to be clear here, Zerodha isn't the only ones doing this. It's pretty common across stockbrokers in India, but earlier this year, SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India, came up with their True to Label circular. This rule says that stockbrokers like Zerodha have to be completely transparent about what they're charging their customers. No more hidden profits. And once this rule kicks in next month in October, Zerodha can say goodbye to that 10% of their revenue. But there's more bad news, because Nithin also mentioned that they've been using some of this revenue to subsidize equity transactions. Basically, the reason why you don't pay anything for those equity transactions is because of this volume-based charge structure. But now it looks like those days are coming to an end. Zerodha might start charging for equity trades to cover their revenue loss, and it doesn't stop there. Because now SEBI has also raised the limits for basic service demat accounts. And what does this mean? It means Zerodha can't charge annual maintenance fees for accounts holding up to 4 lakh rupees worth of securities, and this move will cause another major revenue dip. Now, we don't know how much of a dip, but Nithin calls it meaningful. But here's actually the biggest threat to Zerodha, SEBI's new consultation paper on index derivatives. And if these changes go through, Zerodha could see an additional 30 to 50% drop in revenue, and Nithin expects these regulations to hit at some point this year. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that could severely impact Zerodha's revenues and their growth, but it's not like Zerodha isn't doing anything about this. They've been preparing. They've diversified their business pretty extensively over the years, making their revenue stream more predictable. Last year, for example, they partnered with Smallcase and launched Zerodha Fund House, a passive asset management company that already manages more than 3,000 crore rupees worth of assets. Then there's also Ditto, one of India's biggest insurance distributors, and they've built this in collaboration with FinShots. And then, of course, let's not forget Rainmatter, which has invested into over 120 startups, helping Zerodha build a full ecosystem of financial apps and products. And Zerodha is moving outside of fintech now too. They're also building a media empire with the 01 network, from supporting channels like Think School's Hindi YouTube channel to Indian Silicon Valley podcast. Zerodha has multiple YouTube channels under their wings. And then, of course, they also have their very own channel, 01 by Zerodha, which they launched last year, and they're almost at 300,000 subscribers. Also, speaking of Zerodha and diversification, Nikhil, who has been building his own YouTube channel, recently unveiled the first cohort of startups that received 20 lakh rupees of equity-free grants through his WTF fund. And if you're watching this video and you're a young startup founder under the age of 25 who has a crazy idea, and I do mean crazy here, like using microbial DNA to build a data storage chip, that you can apply to be part of their second cohort. The applications are open until October 15th, and you can find a link in the pinned comment and description down below if you're interested. This isn't a sponsored segment or anything. We're just trying to point you guys in the right direction. I think this is something that anyone who's interested in starting up should participate in, so we wanted to let you all know that applications are still open. All right, next up in the news, OYO just paid $525 million in cash to acquire G6 Hospitality, the company that operates Motel 6. With this deal, OYO gains access to over 1,500 budget motels across the United States and Canada, which is a massive jump from their current 320 hotels in the United States. Now, some would say that it's great to see OYO expand expanding internationally. Some might not. I know there's probably a few people in the comments that feel that way, but this isn't the first time that they've gone big with global ambitions. Some of you might remember that at their peak, OYO was in 80 countries and had a valuation of $10 billion, but then the pandemic hit, forcing them to scale back operations and focus on profitability, dropping their valuation down to just $2.5 billion. But now that OYO is profitable, they've set their sights on an IPO, and this acquisition, well, it's not just about expansion, it's also about boosting their numbers to make OYO more attractive to investors, aiming for better valuations when they go public. And here's why this deal is especially interesting. Motel 6 isn't just any brand, and if you've lived in the United States or Canada, you probably know that it's been around for 60 years and it generates $1.7 billion in gross room revenue annually. Adding Motel 6 to their portfolio not only helps with OYO's US expansion, but also strengthens their credibility in the budget segment, which is a perfect fit for OYO's customer base. OYO is expecting this deal to help them push their EBITDA to over 2,000 crore rupees by FY26, and this might just get their potential investors excited. And I'm curious to know what you guys think. Could this acquisition help OYO to have a more successful IPO? And also, by the way, if you want to find out exactly how OYO turned things around and became profitable, check out the video in the top right corner of your screen. Now, speaking of global ambitions, Indian SaaS giant Zoho just announced that they're aiming to set up data centers in almost every country in the world within the next 10 years. Zoho currently has 18 data centers, but they're planning to add 4 new ones every single year. And according to Zerodha, the founder of Zoho, this is all about data security and privacy, which he believes is going to be huge in coming years. He believes that in the near future, companies that don't have a local data center won't be allowed to operate in those countries. Now, this announcement came during Zoho's annual conference, Zoholics India, but that's not the only announcement that they made. They also launched Vikra, their new seller-signed app for ONDC. With Vikra, Zoho intends to help sellers set up their online stores and tap into this growing network, which now has reached a scale of 12.58 million transactions a month. All right, next up in the news, this week has really been about Indian companies going international, and here's another one. Ultraviolette Automotive has just shipped their first batch of F77 Mach 2 electric motorcycles to the EU. And even Sridhar Vembu, who we were just talking about, congratulated Ultraviolette on this achievement, but honestly, I think this is just the beginning. They also recently unveiled their F99 electric superbike, which was first showcased at the EICMA Milan in 2023. It has a top speed of 265 kilometers per hour, and Ultraviolette is calling it the fastest motorcycle India has ever built. Now, there haven't been any official announcements, but according to some news reports, the F99 electric superbike could be available for sale as soon as next year. All right, now let's move to the funding news segment for today's video. This week, Indian startups raised a total of $302 million, which is slightly lower than last week's $400 million, making it the second consecutive week that funding has been below the trend line. Now, before I talk about this week's funding, there was one update from last week that I wanted to cover. PhysicsWallah raised $210 million in their Series B round, valuing them at $2.8 billion, which is a huge jump from their last valuation of $1.1 billion. Okay, so now let's look at the funny news that happened this week. First of all, Chennai-based M2P FinTech has closed their Series D round now at $101.8 million. And we did cover this last week as well, but they hadn't raised the entire fund at that point, so now it's officially closed at that number. After that, we have Mumbai-based AI diagnostic startup Crore AI, and they're building AI algorithms that can analyze medical images like X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs to detect diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia, and even brain injuries. They've raised $65 million in their Series D round. Following that, we have Bengaluru-based AI startup Nurix AI. Nurix AI is actually Mukesh Bansal's third venture after building successful startups like Myntra and CultFit, and Nurix AI is building AI voice agents that can be used by enterprises to automate repetitive customer support tasks. They've raised $27.5 million. Then after that, we have Pune-based biotech startup Ahamyum Biosciences. They're developing a drug that they're hoping will stop vitiligo and also restore the skin's natural color. They've raised $5 million in their Series Series A round to continue this research. Then after that, we have Mumbai-based healthy bread brand The Health Factory, and they've made a mark by selling bread that is completely from whole wheat flour instead of refined wheat flour, maida. They've raised $3.5 million in their seed round. And then finally, we have this Bengaluru-based PropTech startup Flint. They're trying to solve the renting problem in India by letting you book fully furnished, ready-to-move-in homes with no brokerage, no minimum lock-in, and a minimum deposit. Now, for the time being, they're only operational in Bengaluru, and before you go and book your flat, let me warn you that their prices aren't exactly affordable, but they've raised 6.5 crore rupees, that's $780,000 in their pre-seed round. All right, that is all the startup news that I have for you guys this week. Thank you so much for watching. Go check out our latest Shark Tank India Aftermath video. If you're interested, you can find it in the top right corner of your screen, and I will catch you in the next one.